Ethan sat in the hall with a paper in his hand. Council had given him a task he did not want. He was told to study the Deathworlders. Many said they were dangerous and cruel. He had heard stories that they were wild men and women who could not live with peace, but he had no choice. He was ordered to go and write down what he saw. He packed a small bag and left at dawn. His journey took him across rough lands and empty fields. At night, he thought about what he might find. He had been warned to be careful, that these people were not like others. Some said they would kill without reason. Others said they lived under a queen who ruled them with iron hands. Ethan tried to keep his mind clear, but fear grew in him. When he reached the stronghold of the Deathworlders, he stopped at the gate. 2 men stood guard. Their faces were hard and scarred. Their eyes followed his every move. Ethan showed them the paper from the council. One of them read it, then gave a short nod. Without a word, they opened the gate and let him in. Inside the walls, he saw men and women training. They lifted heavy weights, fought in pairs, and moved with speed he had never seen. Their bodies were marked with cuts and burns. But what shocked him most was not their strength. It was their silence. They did not boast or laugh. They worked as if every moment mattered. Ethan took notes in his book. He wrote how they trained with fire and with steel. He saw how they built traps, how they repaired their weapons, and how they watched the land around them with sharp eyes. Every action was done with care. Every hand knew what to do. It was not chaos. It was order built from hard life. At night, he stayed in a small room near the gate. The sound of drills never stopped. He looked through the window and saw men running in the dark. They carried heavy packs and did not slow down. Women stood in lines practicing with blades. He thought they would collapse, but they kept going. Ethan could not believe what he saw. The council had told him these people were wild, but here he saw discipline beyond reason. One evening he followed the sound of voices, found a group of men gathered around a fire. They were not loud. They shared food and spoke in short words. Their faces were calm, but their eyes told stories of pain. Ethan sat in the shadows and watched. When one of them stood and raised his hand, the rest stood with him. They spoke in one voice, words of loyalty to each other and to their queen. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. It was not fear, it was respect. He could not write this in the way the council wanted. They would never believe it. He walked back to his room that night with his mind torn. He was sent to record proof that Deathworlders were savage. But what he had seen was different. They were not mindless. They were not lost. They were bound to each other in ways he had never seen among his own people. He wondered what the queen would be like if her men were this loyal, and he asked himself if he was ready for what would come next. Ethan woke early to the sound of iron striking against wood. Outside his room, the Deathworlders were already at work. Stepped out and saw men carrying logs on their shoulders while women drove stakes into the ground. There was no rest among them. Even the young were moving supplies from one place to another. It looked more like an army camp than a village. Ethan felt small in front of their endless energy. He walked to the yard where men trained with weapons. One man swung a heavy blade again and again until his arms shook. Another man pushed him aside and took his place without pause. Ethan noticed how none of them spoke during the drills. Every swing, every strike was done in silence. He wrote in his book that silence was their strength. It made the sound of iron louder, the movement sharper, the lesson harder. Later, he followed a group of women to the field. They were gathering food, but even that was done with care and speed. One woman noticed him watching and said he should not wander too far alone. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were cold. Ethan nodded and stayed close. He could feel that even simple tasks held danger here. Every hand was ready to turn from work to defense in a moment. That night, Ethan sat near the fire with a few men who allowed him to join. He asked one of them why they trained without end. The man looked at him and said they had no other choice. Danger lived in every shadow, and weakness could bring ruin to them all. Ethan asked if they did this for the queen. The man nodded once and said they lived for her, but more for each other. Without unity, they would fall. Ethan kept quiet after that. He felt their bond was stronger than chains. As the days passed, he saw more of their life. He saw how they healed their wounded with little tools but steady hands. He saw how they built walls higher each day. He saw how even children learned to fight before they could read. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was done for pride. Ethan found himself drawn to the way they moved. He felt like he was the one being studied instead of them. One evening, he stood near the training yard when a horn was blown. The men dropped what they carried and ran to the wall. Women armed themselves with bows and blades. Ethan followed with his heart racing. He thought it was an attack, but no enemy came. Instead, the queen walked in with a small guard. She did not speak, but her presence made the whole yard still. The men stood straight and the women lowered their weapons. Ethan froze where he stood. He had only heard of her in whispers, and now she was in front of him. She looked over the yard with sharp eyes, then turned her gaze to him. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had been writing about her people for days, but now he was the one being judged. She walked past him without a word, but he felt the weight of her silence. After she left, the men returned to their drills, as if nothing had happened. Ethan could not move for a long time. He knew then that his study was no longer simple. He was standing at the edge of something greater than he could write down. That night, he did not sleep. He kept thinking about the way the queen looked at him. It was not anger and not kindness. It was the look of someone who could see through him. He wondered if she already knew why he was there. He wondered if she would let him stay, or if she would turn him away. He held his book in his hands, but for the first time he could not write a single word. Ethan rose before the sun and walked outside. The air was cold and sharp. Men were already sparring in the yard, while women prepared weapons along the wall. He kept his distance, but his eyes followed every movement. He wrote down their speed and their strength, but the words on his page felt weak compared to what he saw. It was as if his notes could never hold the truth. By midday, he was called by one of the guards. The man told him that the queen wanted to see him. Ethan felt his heart pound in his chest. He followed the guard through narrow paths until they reached a wide hall. The queen sat at the far end, on a seat made of stone and wood. She was not dressed in gold or silk, but in plain wear, like her people. Yet the room was silent as she raised her eyes to him. Ethan bowed his head slightly. The queen asked him why he had come. Her voice was steady and sharp. He told her that the council had sent him to study her people. He said he was to write about their ways and bring the record back. She asked him what he had learned so far. He hesitated, but then told her the truth. He said her people were strong, bound to each other, and that he had seen more order than he had ever known. The queen listened, but gave no sign of what she thought. She only told him to keep watching and to remember what he saw when the time came. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, a horn sounded outside. The queen stood at once, and the guards rushed out. Ethan followed in fear. Men climbed the walls while women formed ranks below. From the distance came the sound of drums and shouts. Attackers were moving toward the stronghold. Ethan froze as arrows began to fly. The queen herself stepped forward and raised her arm. Her men moved with perfect unity. The gates were shut, and the fight began. Ethan ran to the side of the yard. He saw men charge with blades and shields. Women fired arrows with steady aim. The sound of steel clashing filled the air. He wanted to look away, but he could not. The Deathworlders fought with no fear. They struck with speed and vanished into shadows, only to return again with deadly force. Ethan felt his chest tighten as he realized this was no simple defense. This was a dance of survival that had been practiced 1,000 times. He saw one man fall, but another pulled him back while still fighting. We saw a woman lose her bow and grab a blade from the ground without pause. There was no break in their lines. Every strike was answered. Every gap was filled. Ethan's hands shook as he tried to write what he saw, but his pen fell from his fingers. His eyes were locked on the queen. She stood at the center, calm and unshaken, giving short commands that turned the chaos into order. Her presence held the stronghold together. After what felt like hours, the horns of the attackers faded. The gates remained strong. The queen lowered her arm and her men slowed their steps. Bodies were carried away, and the ground was washed with water. Ethan stood in silence, his heart still racing. He had thought he came to study warriors, but he had just witnessed something more. These were not wild fighters. These were humans forged by fire and held together by loyalty. When night came, the stronghold was quiet again. Ethan sat in his room staring at his empty page. He knew now that he could never give the council what they wanted. The truth he had seen would change everything. But he also knew that the queen had seen him watching, and she would not let him remain only an observer. He had been drawn into their world and there was no way back. Ethan could not sleep after the battle. He lay awake listening to the sound of men moving outside and the faint noise of hammers striking iron. Every corner of the stronghold seemed alive even in the dark. He knew now that these people never truly rested. Danger could come at any time, and they were always ready. The memory of the queen standing in the center of the fight stayed in his mind. She had not flinched once. She had guided her people with steady commands, and they had answered without question. At dawn, he walked outside. The ground still showed the marks of the fight. Blood had been washed away, but the smell of smoke hung heavy. Men carried new wood to repair the walls while women cleaned the weapons. Ethan felt a strange weight in his chest. He had come to study them as if they were distant creatures, but he now saw them as more than that. They were men and women like him, yet built of something harder. Wondered what the council would say if they had seen what he had seen. He tried to write his notes, but the words did not match the truth. The council had ordered him to prove that these people were savage. But he had seen unity, courage, and skill. His hand froze over the page. If he told the truth, it would stand against the council. If he lied, it would betray the people he now respected. He felt trapped between duty and honor. Later that day, one of the guards came to him. The guard said the queen wished to see him again. Ethan followed through the hall with heavy steps. The queen sat on the stone seat with men at her side. She looked at him with calm eyes and asked what he had learned from the battle. Ethan told her that he had seen strength beyond measure. Said her people were not savage, but disciplined and loyal. The queen nodded and said he had witnessed only the beginning. She told him that the council feared what they did not understand. She said that was why they had sent him. She warned him that the council would not accept the truth, wanted only a reason to call her people dangerous so they could destroy them. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Her words matched the fear he had carried in his heart. The queen then told him he would soon have to choose where he stood, with the council or with the Deathworlders. Ethan left the hall shaken. He walked along the wall and saw the men training again, as if the battle had never happened.
Our women
Were sharpening blades with steady hands. Children were moving stones to build higher defenses. He realized that their life was a cycle of struggle, yet none of them complained. They lived each day ready to face death. Still they stood together. That night, the stronghold gathered for a ritual. Men and women formed a circle around the fire. Ethan was allowed to stand at the edge. One by one, they raised their hands and spoke words of loyalty to each other and to the queen. The fire lit their faces, and the sound of their voices carried through the night air. Ethan felt his skin prickle. He understood then that their unity was not built on fear, but on choice. Each one of them chose to stand and fight for the other. When the ritual ended, Ethan stayed by the fire long after the others left. His heart was heavy. He knew that his time of hiding behind paper and ink was ending. The queen had seen through him. She knew why he had come. The council expected his report soon, but he also knew that no report could capture the truth he had witnessed. He was standing at the edge of a decision that would change his life and perhaps the fate of all who lived behind those walls. Ethan walked the yard with his notes in his hand, but his mind was not on the paper. Every word he had written felt weak compared to what he had seen. He had been ordered to prove that the Deathworlders were a danger. But he now knew that the danger came not from them, but from the lies the council spread. He could not sleep or eat with peace. His choice weighed on him heavier with each passing hour. One morning, the queen called for him again. She stood before her people in the hall. Her men lined the walls, silent and steady. She told Ethan that the council had sent word. He demanded his return and his report at once. Her voice was calm, but her eyes fixed on him like a blade. She asked him if he would carry the truth or carry the lies. Ethan felt his breath catch. He looked at the men who had fought with such unity and at the women who had stood unbroken. He thought of the children who carried stones to build walls higher. Then he thought of the council waiting to twist his words into chains against them. He told the queen he could not betray what he had seen. He said the council was wrong, and that her people deserved to be known for their strength and their courage. A silence fell across the hall. The queen stepped forward and placed her hand on his shoulder. She said his choice had bound him to them now. He was no longer only an observer. He would share their path, whether it led to peace or to war. That night, the stronghold was restless. Word had spread that the council would not accept Ethan's truth. They would come with force to end what they feared. Ethan stood on the wall beside the men as they prepared for battle. He was no warrior, but he could not walk away. He carried water, passed arrows, and helped mend armor. Every small act tied him closer to them. He no longer felt like an outsider. He felt like one of their own. As the sunset horn sounded in the distance, dust rose on the horizon as the council's forces moved closer. The queen walked along the wall, and her people stood taller at her side. Ethan watched her and felt no fear. He had seen her lead before. He knew she would not break. When the first strike came, the stronghold shook, but did not fall. Men fought with blades, women loosed arrows with deadly aim, and the queen gave her orders with steady command. Ethan moved among them, carrying what they needed, his heart racing but his steps sure. The fight raged through the night. The council's forces pushed hard, but the Deathworlders held stronger. Their unity turned every strike into a shield, and every shield into a weapon. Ethan saw men fall, but others lifted them up. He saw women cut paths through the enemy without pause. The ground shook with the weight of their will. When the dawn came, the council's forces broke and fled. The stronghold still stood. After the battle, the queen gathered her people in the yard. She told them they had faced the council and stood unbroken. She said they would face more trials in days to come, but that their bond was their true power. Then she turned to Ethan and told him that his witness was no longer written in a book, but written in the fire of battle. He had chosen, and now he was part of them. Ethan looked at the faces around him. Scarred men, steady women, even children who had carried stones. They were not what the council had called them. They were more. They were proof that humans could survive any world if they stood together. He had been ordered to study them, but instead he had witnessed the unthinkable. He had seen the rise of a people who could never be broken.